Welcome back to the Time When series, because I have no better name for it. And tubes of you, today I'm going to take you on an adventure of the time when I went to a Jehovah's Witness convention. I laughed, I cried, I tried to make friends with disfellowshipped people being shunned. Because I don't know, maybe it's because I have a major problem with twisting the Bible to spiritually abuse people. I've mentioned many times before on my channel that I first got started in ministry in 2011 when I got out of New Thought. And this ministry was primarily to reach out to Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. I grew a love for them that's hard to describe, but the best way that I can put it is that my heart yearned for them to know the true gospel. And I empathized deeply with their pain inside that fed their need to be a part of such a high control religious group. Now, it's not an excuse, but it is a reason. And by the way, I think that this is a very biblical and Christ-like posture towards anyone. We need to stand in a position where we see people as people, not dehumanizing them, erring on grace and seeking to understand them and then be understood. However, this does not equal an endorsement or affirmation of their spiritual or moral positions. This is crucial because this just means that you can approach people that you disagree with in truth without bitterness in your heart. Now, if you've been around my channel any amount of time, you know that I don't play these games where the lines get blurred purposefully out of a compliance to be liked by the culture, or when there's just downright bad theology or a distortion of the identity of Jesus or the gospel being taught, because distorted gospels and bad theology hurt people. But I also firmly understand that people are not my enemy. They are made in the image of God. You, whoever you are made in the image of God. It doesn't matter what community you're a part of, what you look like, what you believe. I think that there's a much more effective way to disagree than picking up our pitchfork and torches. And don't get me wrong, some people assume that because you're disagreeing with them at all on any level, then you're basically one of those people. But I digress. I share this because this is my posture towards Jehovah's Witnesses. They are by far one of the most difficult religious groups I've ever talked with. And in order to know why, you should check out my video on cult mind control in the description below. And I also have an entire series about Jehovah's Witness doctrine that you can check out as well, as this particular video is about my visit to their convention and not necessarily digging into their doctrine. So first, let me describe what these conventions are, okay? Every year, Jehovah's Witnesses hold a 3-day convention, usually in the summer. They're all day, and they consist of talks, interviews, and skits as well. They say that the purpose for these is to learn about the Bible, and they welcome the public. They invite the public as well. Now, these conventions happen all over the world, and they are no small event. They fill up entire stadiums, and believe me, they are very proud of this fact. This is also an event where many baptisms of the Jehovah's Witnesses take place. Now, this might sound very boring to many people, and don't get me wrong, a lot of it is. But a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses actually look forward to this event because important announcements are made, like new literature and what they call new light, which is basically just a fancy word for, oops, we had this wrong all along, so we need to amend our teaching on this. Don't question this or else. So be glad we're getting closer to truth. Yay. It's in the fine print. Personally, I always thought that New Light was very manipulative, but a brilliant way to keep their doctrine constantly changing and the witnesses in compliance. Now, another thing that I found kind of interesting, and to be honest, kind of adorable, is that another reason they look forward to these is because many younger Jehovah's Witnesses are looking for spouses. I had a former Jehovah's Witness friend tell me that many of the girls will wear just their best dresses and really go all out to try to meet a guy, and sure enough, when I went, there were groups of giggling girls in fancier than normal dresses spread throughout the convention. Honestly, I thought it was kind of adorable. So I'm not sure if that's true for them all, but when I went, that was definitely true. Now let's get into the actual visit. First, I think it's important for people to know that I visit places like this all the time, and I have no plans of stopping. I have no shortage of places that I have visited that I eventually want to share. But I find it very interesting to visit different places and truly understand what they teach And this is my boots on the ground reaching others. I think this really plays a part when you're able to see them face to face and are able to interact with them one-on-one. So this particular year that I went was called Safeguarding Your Heart, and I went all 3 days. And I'm not going to share every detail with you, but just a few interesting incidents. Now, that weekend in particular, I was wanting to see what their new publications would be because I collect them and what their new light would be. I get dressed, I grab my Bible and a few witnessing supplies and head over to the convention. It's packed, but I find a parking space and I head in. And immediately, I see two witnesses that I know, an elder and his wife, in the front handing out badges. Pay attention to the badges because they play a part in the rest of this video. This was actually an odd interaction. They were surprised but happy to see me, but they seemed very nervous about if I should have a badge or not. They sort of nervously laughed about it. They were being very polite, let me be clear, but it was obvious that something was different about this. So my Jehovah's Witness friend said that she would make one for me. And she's like, oh yeah, she's okay to have one, but then never got me one. Now, at the time, I was actually very confused about this until later I learned from my former Jehovah's Witness friend, and she laughed at me too. But then she explained that the reason why this is important is because when you have a name tag, when you have a badge, it means that you're good association. If you don't have one, it means typically that you're either disfellowshipped or bad association. And I gotta be honest, because I actually found this even more confusing, because I thought, if this is open to the public, then what do newcomers do? How are they treated? And then my friend laughed again, and she said that they're opening up to the public is usually a formality and they're not actually expecting a lot of strangers to come. Now, again, I don't know if that's true at all conventions. I know that Jehovah's Witnesses are known for the uniformity though. They are very strict about being in agreement about these kinds of things. So I'm just expressing what my experience was like with the badge. But in particular, my confusion was just trying to wrap my head around how they were gonna treat the public if they showed up without a badge. But yes, apparently the badge is important as it associates you as one of Jehovah's people. So you're to wear this outside the convention as well, so that you can be a good example of what it's like to be a happy Jehovah's Witness who's proud to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's looked at as like a conversation starter as well. Now, I didn't want to stand out, but I didn't get a badge. So I bravely went badgeless and I found a place towards the back of the convention center. Now, what they don't tell you or announce to the public is that, at least in my area, is that there's actually a section for those who are disfellowshipped and being shunned by everyone. And this is where I tried to sit by. In the arena where I was at, they were behind the speaking podium looking out at everyone. And I actually took a picture of where I was sitting. I sat here on purpose because I was actually trying and hoping to find some disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witnesses. I feel horrible for these people. Shunning is nothing short of cruel and emotional and mental torture and manipulation to get you to comply to the religion. It's absolutely awful what these people go through. So I sat during the talk and took notes, but my goal in being there was actually to try to start conversations and even leave little notes that I call seed droppers. I actually have some of them. They're like little cards. I actually carry these in my wallet and I drop them every now and then, maybe at like a supermarket, and just leave them hoping that a Jehovah's Witness might see it. These are the stones that I hope to leave in Jehovah's Witnesses' shoes. Now, as far as interactions though, there were a few notable things that happened. First is the one thing that is the hardest thing for me to witness at conventions by far, and that's watching the baptisms. If you have watched my Jehovah's Witness series, you'll know that the way that they do baptisms is very different. They do not do it in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They overlook that completely. What they do is they ask two questions. Now, I'm paraphrasing what they ask, but first they ask if they've repented of their sins and if they're ready to dedicate their life to Jehovah and his way of salvation through Jesus. Then the second question is asking if they understand that they are going to be identified as part of Jehovah's organization as part of their baptism. So basically, it goes from being baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit to being baptized in the name of Jehovah, the Watchtower Jesus, and in the name of the organization. And guys, for me, honestly, that's hard. That's the definitive moment where their entire life will never ever be the same again. Once you are baptized into the Jehovah's Witness religion, it's like signing a contract for life. You now belong to them. And just being real with you guys, after I witnessed this, I went into a bathroom stall and I cried a little bit for them and I was praying for them. It reminded me of how much they really needed the true gospel. Now, the second notable incident that happened the second day I was there was a particularly long and boring talk happening, and I decided to go walk around the center and pray. And at one point, I walked outside and there was a man sitting down with his arms folded and his head down. He didn't look right. He did not look like he was praying. It was very clear that this man was upset. So I kind of went and I lingered next to him, and when he noticed I was there, I struck up a conversation with him. He was visibly upset, so I just straight out asked him if he was okay. He hesitated, then noticed I didn't have a badge, and asked if I was disfellowshipped. When I said no, that I'm actually just someone visiting, he actually seemed relieved that I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. Turns out not having a badge was very useful for this conversation. So with disdain, this man shared that he was outside because he couldn't stand to be inside and listen to this junk, as he called it. He said that this religion has ruined his entire life. And I thanked him for sharing that with me, a perfect stranger. And I was able to ask a few more questions and gave him some information that I hope he took advantage of. And then he said he had to go back inside. I did not see him again after that. Now, the third interaction was with a woman who was immediately suspicious of me because I didn't have a badge. But then I explained I was just visiting as a member of the public, and then we got into a conversation about New Light, which was surprisingly very fruitful. I was able to ask some really good questions, but I know because she was doing her best to be a representative of Jehovah, and she most likely saw me as a potential convert, she kept herself very guarded. Now, this last interaction is one that is stuck in my memory forever, and I think about it very often, actually. Now, the last day that I was able to be there, I really wanted to do something to reach out to one of the disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witnesses. So for those of you that don't know, this is really messed up because not only are Jehovah's Witnesses in good standing not allowed to talk to them, the disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witnesses are not allowed to talk to anyone, even if someone talks to them. If a witness talks to someone who's disfellowshipped, the person who's disfellowshipped is supposed to tell them immediately, oh, I'm disfellowshipped, and they know not to interact or talk to them. This is so twisted because this is actually seen as a virtuous thing, and I see it as abusive and toxic, and I wanted them to know the love of Jesus and the true gospel and not the spiritual abuse of a cult. So there was this one woman I was sitting in close proximity to for the weekend, and I just casually observed her and felt absolutely horrible for her. She was quite young. She was there all alone, and nobody would sit by her or talk with her at lunch. Like, it broke my heart, you guys. Lonely little 9-year-old elementary school Melissa felt this in her bones. So during one of the last breaks, I decided to actually do something. I went up to her during a break and sat next to her. She was immediately surprised and right away told me she was disfellowshipped. And I looked right at her and I'm like, I don't have a badge. Turns out I learned a few things the last few days. Not having a badge can get you places for the gospel. I totally anticipated this, and I told her I was not a Jehovah's Witness. Now, I'm paraphrasing the conversation, and I knew we only had a few minutes, but I wanted her to know that Jehovah loved her, that God loved her, and there's forgiveness through Jesus, not through men. I told her that if she were willing, she could cry out to him and truly find that acceptance and love that she was looking for. I gave her a note that had my email address in it, and I told her if she ever needed a friend or wanted to know more to message me. And to be honest, guys, at the time, I did not know what to make of the interaction at first because she looked like uncomfortable, kind of quiet, maybe a little annoyed with me. So I knew to make it brief. I mean, I could read the room. But to my complete shock, like a few weeks later after the convention, she ended up emailing me. Now, I might share more in a later video of my other visits because I was exhausted after this first visit. This is the first time I went to the convention, but this was not the only time. And I might even go this year to the Jehovah's Witness convention. I prayed constantly the whole time I was there. I also met plenty of other interesting and wonderful people, but these were the few interactions that I wanted to highlight. Please pray for the Jehovah's Witnesses. There are people that are in the bondage of strict legalistic religion and know nothing of the love of God. They are stuck in rigid religious rules that they'll never be able to follow. And let it remind us of the power of the gospel and that Jesus can indeed free them from their bondage. So there is my visit to a Jehovah's Witness convention. My only regret in filming this is I didn't have a satirical badge on the whole time to make myself important. I hope you guys got something out of this. Let me know what you think in the comments below.